of the main property that we own of the Arboretum. There are cooperating neighbors in some of these insets, but they're not shown on the map. This is 20 acres. This is where you are, up here, off Maple Avenue. This is where I live down here. And I've lived here for 48 years. You don't start by making an arboretum, you start by landscaping your place, and it kind of evolves. And after about 10 years, I got more land in the back, so then I figured maybe I could do it, and then gradually developed a plan. This is the western corner. This is the all-purpose swamp. That means anything that can stand wet feet. Metasequoia field, Japanese hill, Chinese strip, Russian pond, Russian hill, Fir Trail, and then there's an area around the house with a deer fence just around that, so that each individual thing doesn't have to be screened. All the ponds have been put in the past 48 years, along with about 3,500 plantings, and if you can think of something that might grow in the area, I've probably either got it or have tried it. And so we'll start by walking out the back door. And because it's a little higher than everything else, it's a good vantage point that beckons you on. This house was built right after World War II. It was enlarged more recently. And the lot was probably created with sand fill to make it level. Obviously, that large white pine was not an area where they put the fill. That's probably 150 to 200 years old, somewhere in that range. And we're going to walk down this edge.
Just want to hear and make sure you get close to the voice. Stop there. Yeah.
You see, this bank is much too steep to represent something that's been there for thousands of years. This is the bottom of Glacial Lake Albany, and it's solid clay, 80 to 100 feet thick. If you find a rock, somebody brought it in. Now this land was farmed at one point, and when it was abandoned from farming, it grew up as a white pine forest. And that's where the name of Pine Hollow Road came from. If you know anything about eastern white pines, the normal tree grows straight and tall. And the reason they have multiple trunks is disease. A moth lays its eggs in the growing tip, it kills it, and then the tree has to have a bend in it or a fork. But the moth won't fly 100 feet up in the air, so after it gets up a ways, it doesn't happen anymore. The tall conical tree in the middle is a grand fir. It lives on the west coast, and it becomes the largest fir in the world. But it's not one of the oldest living firs. 250 years it's old, but it can get close to 300 feet tall in that time. This little weeping tree is an Alaskan yellow cedar. The word cedar is kind of a misnomer. It's a lumberman's term, which is generally applied to any growing tree that has scale-like leaves that lay over on each other. That was thought to be a false cypress, but recently has been shown not to be. It is now in its own genus.
Here's the deer like it, is that correct?
The deer will like it. You can see there's a fence around it.
Yeah.
And it's eaten right up to the fence. In the first 10 years I lived here, there were no deer. The poaching was too heavy. And then subsequently they came in, and if I didn't fence something, why, it got eaten. I'm not sure yet, but we'll make it. But
Which one?
that tree right there. That's a Medoc cypress, California. It's the hardiest of all the cypress. Cupressus, I'll think of the other name in a minute. When we weed out things, we try to leave the berry bush. We're on a 2-year cycle. If you cut off this, you won't have any berries next year. So when you're weeding out, if you want to have your berries each year, you've got to be sure to leave the ones that are going to be for next year.
You thought I was going to give them to you?
Yeah, gentlemen.
Gentlemanly?
Cupressus bakeri. That's the name.
There you go.
You know, as long as you don't try to think about it, it'll come.
Right.
Check.
You can go.
Yeah, we walk like from here, like through there, you know, before we actually get to.
Okay.
But you can obviously film's cheap. So,
Yeah.
3 hours. You know, you might get something better now.
Which are like boysenberries.
Oh, wow.
And those are the black raspberries
Oh, yeah.
back down in there.
These
Now,
two.
there's nothing to keep you from crawling down there and getting them, but there is poison ivy around, and if I see some, I'll point it out to you. And they are edible, but they are rather tasteless. And they turn
Nano?
blue. They turn blue like a little, prune.
What are they called? Nano?
Nannyberry.
Nanny?
Viburnum lentego.
Is that a wild raisin?
Now,
Raisin?
well, it's in that, there are related types that are called wild raisin, but I have a lot of these natively, and I call it dirty bottomwood, because when you cut it, it has that kind of a disagreeable smell.
Huh. Do you mind?
No, go ahead.
There's a tulip tree that I planted as a hand-sized seedling.
Oh.
Where you see the bend in it, about 15 feet up, is where it broke off and lost 2/3 of its height in the early snowstorm before the leaves fell in 1987.
This tree.
So that tree is, the whole height of that tree is since 1987.
Whoa. Tulip tree.
Things, almost all of them were planted from a 1-gallon pot. I try to avoid 5-gallon pots. They're too heavy, they're too costly, and it's harder to deal with. However, if I could get nothing else any other way, I'd do it. That's probably almost 2 feet through already. On the left side of the grand fir is a noble fir. They're both planted at the same time. The noble fir is the second largest fir in the world, and it can live 1,000 years. So it's going to be there long after the other one's gone. Because you can see so many spruces from it. And the blue one is called hoopsie eye. It's one of the best of the Colorado blue spruces for the east. As you walk by this small plant without a fence on it, gently feel its needles from last year, and you'll know why it doesn't need a fence.
Seriously?
Yeah, that's why they're tricky for Christmas.
Picea chihuahua. That's blues for the northeast. Now, the average Colorado spruce in the wild is not blue. It's just that people like the blue color, so that's the one you get in the nursery trays. That spruce over there is orientalis. Doesn't come from the Orient, comes from the Caucasus. It has the shortest needles of any spruce tree. And this one is from Japan. Matter of fact, I'm wrong. It's China. It's called Lichiensis purpura. And you won't see the purpura until it starts to cone. Well, very reachable.
Okay, thanks. I'm on it.
Now this field I call the Metasequoia field because this field is created by the fill that was removed from that front pond. And after I did it, I planted this tree. This was one that came in about a 2 or 3 gallon pot. And you know, Metasequoias were thought to be an extinct tree at one time. They were found in the early 1940s as fossils, and then they discovered they really existed in China. And the Arnold Arboretum got some seed out before the Chinese communists completely took over in about 1945 or 6. And so for 30, 40 years, all the trees that we have in this country or in the world came from those seed collections. But since 1980, they've been able to go back and get a lot more. And they do have different growth forms, and you'll see that while you're here. This one has a very broad spreading growth form, extremely buttressed trunk. It's over 5 feet through at the base. Remember, only 48 years here. This is the fastest growing tree I have on the place.
What's it called again?
It's called a dawn redwood. It's called Metasequoia, Glyptostroboides. And it's like a cousin of our redwoods.
Yeah.
And the reason it's hardy is it's one of the deciduous conifers. It loses its needles, so it makes it hardier, like a larch. Now over here is a bald cypress. They're the same age. The bald cypress is much slower growing, you can see. But both trees like a lot of moisture, and the bald cypress can actually grow right out of standing water almost.
Which one's the bald cypress?
This feathery, no, the big one.
Right there.
Yeah. Now there are knees that the bald cypress produces, but in this area which I have kept mowed, I can't let the knees form, so they get mowed off. But if you could look down in there, and you can't because of all the ferns, you would see knees. And I've got my tree with the best knees is on the back side of this side pond, and we aren't going to be walking there today. It's a smaller tree. If you get over here, you can see it. It's developing a new top because an ice storm took the top out a year ago. It'll be okay. That tree has 24 or more knees, that's what they call them. It's part of the root system. The root grows out like this, and then it gradually bends up like that, and even forms a point. You'd never realize that that's how it was formed. And so that's a very interesting area to look over
Which
in there.
tree are we looking at?
That feathery one,
Oh, the one across.
right in the middle, right across the pond. Yeah.
Okay, across the pond.
Yeah, that you have to take this wet, soggy trail on the back side in order to get a look at the knees.
I
But it's one of the things
I have
to
some
do.
good photos of them. I made it back there.
Right. This is Japanese white pine. These are Japanese willow trees.
Wow.
So we're starting in the Japanese
Well,
Chinese
yes,
section.
when we go through this little area, we're entering the Japanese hill area. And so on this side of the hill, I have the false cypress from Japan called Chamaecyparis piscifera and various cultivars. In the middle and on the far side of the hill, I've got Chamaecyparis obtusa. They both come from Japan, and it's some of its cultivars. This pine is a jack pine, which is to northern Canada like our pitch pine is to the pine bush locally. You can see how fat that trunk is over there.
Yeah, like the redwoods.
Very buttressed. It gets narrow quite rapidly.
Relative.
Red, yeah.
That's the common name.
And This is the main Camasiferous piscifera. Look at all the cones. And of course our motto is trees in a natural environment. And what does it mean? It means an environment where the tree can reach its best proportions. But the real key is, can the tree reproduce? If the tree can't reproduce, there's something missing from its environment. I've already got one seedling from that one. Now the thing about the jack pine is that those cones stay on for 20 years and they open up in fire and allow the tree to reseed itself after a fire. If it weren't for fire, the pine bush would disappear because the pitch pine has the same qualities. Now, as you come through here, we'll kind of stop a minute and look back. As you come through here, you can stop and look back. You can see the main piscifera, Camasiferous piscifera, and then this is a cultivar. Over there, that's called Camasiferous piscifera filifera. This is Filifera aura. And the fir tree behind it is a Japanese fir called Abies vetch. Now this bright green tree right here is called an umbrella pine, but it is not a pine. Sciadopodus verticillata. It's a Japanese tree, and I'm very proud of that tree. I've got 3 of them, but this is the biggest one. And it keeps its deep green color in the winter. The other 2 I've got kind of get faded, more brown looking in the winter. So this is a very, very nice tree, and if it continues to do as well as it's doing, it's going to be a big, nice specimen. Now the weeping tree in the middle of the Japanese hill with the bench is a weeping Fuji cherry. It has pink buds with white blooms, and I don't think it's a long-lived tree. It almost looks like it might be in a little bit decline already, but it's sprouting vigorously from its base, so I'm going to let those take over someday. Now, this is another cultivar of the piscifera called boulevard. People like that tree when it's small because it's a tight green growth, compact. But when you let it get big, this is what it looks like.
The one here?
Right here, this one.
Oh, the big one.
Big one. In other words, most people have seen that tree and have recognized it only as something this tall or little, very tight growth. But when you let it grow and it gets bigger, it separates out and begins to look like a tree.
Yeah, I like the shapes of that one.
And here, this is the first year that this filifera has coned so heavily. So if I'm lucky, we should be getting a lot of seedlings. Now, as we turn and look this way, you can see a yellow tree across the hill. That's Camasiferous obtusa, Cripsii, and it grows about 30 feet tall. And that tree taught me a very important lesson. One year, when the winter was a little bit colder, everything on that tree that wasn't very yellow died. Well, that kind of rang a bell. I thought, well, the yellow must be hardier. I wonder if that applies to other forms of false cypress. Because I'd had a Camasiferous lawsoniana from the west that was doing well, but every time I got another one, it didn't do. It died the first winter. So then I ordered golden showers, and it lives. So the gold color is hardier in the false cypress.
Mm-hmm.
And then This more compact tree is a Hinoki cypress, which is the cypress. Hinoki cypress is the favorite tree of the Japanese emperor. And they come in very compact dwarf forms, middle-sized forms, bigger forms. This one I think is middle-sized. It's slow growing, but it can keep going a long time.
How long has it been growing here?
Well, probably at least 25 years, you know, at least that. If the tag is on it, it might have it listed on it. But behind you is this is a Japanese maple, and in the fall, that has the most brilliant red color, and it lasts after all the other things are off. Now, we can look across over there, and you can see a tree with double trunks. It goes up 3/4 of the way up that large soft maple, right in the middle there. That's a katsura. Katsuras tend to have multiple trunks. I've got one that has a single trunk, but that one has 2 trunks and is now developing a 3rd. And the katsura leaves are heart-shaped, much like our redbud, only they're smaller. And I've tried to find all the plants that have that kind of leaf, and I plant them in the area of this field down here, which I call the azalea field. Now we're going to walk back this way, over this little bridge. One of the invasive-like plants that's taking over, if you don't weed it out, are these thistles. Fortunately, they pull out easily if you just pull straight up on them, but you've got to have very thick gloves to do it. Now all these cedars are northern white cedars, which are arborvitae, Thuya occidentalis. They're the classic cedar of the Northeast. And they were all planted the size of your hand, bare root. You know, you get 100 of them from muzzers. Well, they are the favorite food of deer in the winter. This tree is a philodendron, and you can see our worst invasive growing on it. That's the European bittersweet. It's bad because it doesn't just grow up the tree, it grows around it and around it and up it, which means it ultimately strangles the tree like a snake strangling an animal. The vine can get as thick as your wrist in time. It doesn't give up. If you push on the bark, you'll notice it gives like cork. So one of the things, it's not the tree they make cork from, but it's called a cork bark tree. Now I have lots of native crab apples that grow in wet, swampy land, which is unusual for the apple genus. And so when I see one, I tend to leave it because they don't get as big as other trees, and if they fit into the environment and time, I just leave them. And this is one. This is a ginkgo. Ginkgos can live 1,000 years, and they, along with the Metasequoia, are genetically unaltered for over 100 million years. So they're one of the oldest trees in our environment. They predate the dinosaurs.
I was in Philadelphia and I saw the first ginkgo planted in America.
You did?
Yep.
How big through was it?
It wasn't huge. It wasn't really...
It wasn't growing fast, right?
I guess not.
Well, this one is doing exceptionally well in terms of growing. And I think the key to my I don't believe that you could have any better conditions for Metasequoia than I've got. This one up here is probably my fastest growing one. It's not buttressed at the base, it's straight trunked. It's 2 years younger than the one in the other field, planted about 46 years ago. You come up here and look at
They're
it,
very pretty.
I would say it's between 3 and 4 feet through. And it's not buttressed like the other one, which is 5 to 6 feet through. But look at it. Now just think, that tree has only been planted here for about 46 years.
So you did some research. Aren't our Metasequoias some of the larger specimens in the country?
Well, no, because I planted these in the late 60s. The expedition that got the seed out was the mid-40s. So there are many, many trees in the country, in certain arboretums and on certain estates that were planted in the late 40s and early 50s, which gives them a 15-year jump on me. However, I've seen some of those, and they aren't growing as fast, at least not all of them. In other words, like there are trees on the Boston Garden and Boston Common, and the problem there is they're not getting enough moisture. These trees are getting enough moisture and they love it, and they're reseeding too. Their little seedlings are occurring.
Have you seen the one at the Cleveland Art Gallery? There's a big one right outside the main
No.
door there. Yeah,
No, I haven't.
good big one.
The biggest one that I've seen was in the Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge,
Oh yeah,
next to their pond.
yes.
That's the biggest one I've seen. That doesn't mean there aren't bigger ones. But I think in time, I'm going to be right in the ballpark, because these trees, both of them are, and they represent two different growth forms. You'll notice how buttressed that one is,
Yeah.
and compared to this one.
Does it have anything to do with moisture?
I don't think so.
I mean,
The buttressing. I don't think
Buttressing is usually a moisture thing though, isn't it?
the buttressing.
For many trees.
Well, I can't answer it. And I don't think so. First of all, that field, remember, is fill from the front pond, and it was a very wet field. So if those roots have any depth to them at all, they're getting plenty of moisture.
Yeah.
This is a Japanese larch, which also broke off in that same storm. You see a little crook in it there. 1987. Let's see. Over here is a Japanese arborvitae. That's this one. And so is that other one. Every time I reordered Japanese arborvitae from Forest Farm, I got a tree which is slightly different than the first one. So now we need a true scientist to try to figure out what the difference is. And you can see that it too would be eaten, destroyed by the deer if you didn't have a fence around it.
I'd swear it smells different. It smells different for a regular.
Don't smell that one, because that's labeled as the same tree from the nursery I got it.
I'm only just comparing it to what I think of as a normal red
Okay,
white cedar.
now try to get a smell on that one.
Yeah, that's got a little more spice to it. It's more
I
of
think they are different trees,
yeah.
but I don't know which one is the true tree, and nor do I know what to call the other one that isn't. But sooner or later we'll find out. And you'll notice this is the first year this one's coned, and this is the first year this one's coned. And they are cones that are growing up like an arborvitae. And so in that sense, they appear to be arborvitae. Now there is a cryptomeria. Now, it's hard to find hardy cryptomerias. That one came from Wayside, and I believe I have two of them from Wayside, and I think the name is Radicans. Let me see the label. Yeah, this is Radican, and that is Kitayama. That one is smaller in growth, but the reason it's so much smaller is that it almost got cut off once, and it had to grow up from the one limb that got left. But it's doing very well. And this is a naturally seeded Japanese larch from that larch over there. So I let it go. I may ultimately need to remove it, but for the time being, I'm just leaving it. And you can see what the deer do. They reach up and they grab what they can and they pull down on it. So if you look at this limb, up here it's kind of bent and broken where it got bent over. When you see that, a deer did it. The next tree I'm going to show you, well actually before that, this tree over here with a slightly peeling bark is a Zelkovia. That's the tree that's planted along Commonwealth Avenue in Boston as a replacement for American elm. But it's not the same genus. Not Elmus, it's Zelkovia.
They got that.
Yeah, but it's got the same way of growing.
It's hard to tell here. You can see it on the street certainly.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of them.
Now, as we go through here, we're going to see a tree that's called Calopanix pictus. And when you see it, don't lean into it. You'll know why it has such a name. Just don't lean over there and try to support yourself. Well, those thorns could go right through your hand. This blooms in August with a feathery, couple hundred little flowers to one bloom. And it has a leaf somewhat like a sweet gum or a maple. This reminds you of that anyway.
Where is it from?
Japan. Okay, now we're going to look through this way. That's a single trunk Katsura. This is a Japanese butternut. This is a Japanese horse chestnut. Now you hear that bird? That's a catbird. Catbirds are so friendly that when you sit down and weed and start to bare the ground, they'll come right down and sit beside you and eat things they can get at because you've weeded. That larch is called a golden larch. It's Pseudolarix amabilis, and it's considered to be one of the prettiest of the deciduous conifers. This tree over here is a Korean philodendron, and that tree is a Chinese tulip tree. Now, they say it doesn't get quite as big as our native tulips. Its claim to fame is when its leaves first come out, they have a more reddish tint. Over the years, we're going to learn more about it, but anyway, it's a fast grower. The philodendrons have both male and female trees. The one over there, Philodendron amorense, is female. This is a male. I don't know if they're close enough, but we'll find out. if you go up and push on that bark, this tree is getting, is doing exceptionally well, so it should be a really big specimen someday.
What about the bark, John?
Pardon me?
What about the bark?
Oh, push on it. It's corky. If you go right up to it and give, it's got very nice corky bark. Better than the last one that you looked at. The tree you're looking at now is a Yulon lily tree. It's a Magnolia denudata. And it has white blooms in the spring, but if there's any frost when the blooms are out, they turn to mush. It's more or less endangered in China where it comes from, because I think they make things out of its roots, and they also eat the petals and fry them. I haven't tried that yet.
A cucumber? Too?
No, this is not a cucumber
Not
tree.
cucumber?
That's arc tree. The largest and hardiest of the magnolia family is the cucumber tree,
I see.
which is Magnolia acuminata. And that, I didn't show you that when we bypassed it. And that is used to make the trees hardier, to make them bigger, but they don't always want them to be bigger, and to introduce the yellow color into the blooms. Now we'll go out the Chinese strip a little bit.
Yeah, there were like, is it 3,200 different species?
No, well, no, genuses I probably am approaching pretty close to 200 genuses. Now species, like I have at least 30 plus different species of firs and spruces. The thing about oriental firs is they're not furry, they're needly.
Some of them were quite sharp.
What's that?
Some of them were quite sharp, I
Yeah.
said.
Well, you can check them out by feeling trees. And over here, this particular one here can grow 8 feet through. This is a Japanese Nikko fir. That's a Korean fir. Nephrolepis, Homolepis, Holophyllum. I mean, take me a long time to remember that. And there's no way I could tell you what it was if I hadn't planted it.
Now what's this tree with the
Now this is a native cottonwood.
cottonwood?
Now cottonwoods can get huge, but they also generally don't live much more than 100 years. Now there's my tallest cedar of Lebanon. It's about 15 feet tall down there. And it's got a fence around it, because if it wasn't, it would be gone. You see it about 15 feet
Yeah, I
tall
see it.
down in there. And I've got several others planted in that area, which all are doing quite well. Now these are all northern firs from the Caucasus, except for this one, which is Turkish. Now, when I bought, this is Himalayan musk rose, and when I bought it, it said it has beautiful pinkish blooms all summer. Well, it does make it for about 2 weeks. Maybe as it gets older, it'll bloom all summer, but not yet. And it can grow way up on the tree, 30 feet. It sure does make a difference whether you're in the sun or the shade, doesn't it? Now, this is a native black cherry. Black cherry is the mahogany of the north. And that's a beautiful specimen. It's never going to get to be wood in furniture, but all your cherry furniture comes from that tree. That's the big tree right there. This is King Boris's fir from Bulgaria. This is another one. And this is the Trojan horse fir, Equi trojani. Now remember when we came down the path, I showed you my biggest, best noble fir growing next to the grand fir. This is another one. You can count the year's growth. This is this year. Each between the stems, this is each a year's growth. If you count it up, this tree has been in for 20 years. But you see it grows very slow. But it keeps doing it for 1,000 years.
Wow.
Now, trees that grow that way tend to grow slow in youth, but they speed up a little in midlife. So it doesn't always grow that slow. And over here, I've got a few examples of alpine firs. I've got some better ones over there. One of my sons, who's mountain climbed, got these from the 8,000 foot level on a mountain in New Mexico between Albuquerque and Santa Fe. They're Abies lasioscarpa, and there are two types, the main type and the Arizonica. The Arizonicas are called corkbark firs, and they're prettier. They have bluer needles and prettier bark. There's another one hidden in there. That's another grand fir, like the big one at the bottom of the entrance trail. That's a silver fir from the west. The bluish one is concolor. So, and this is a Spanish fir.
Do the firs stop growing or slow down?
The firs?
Yeah, in like August, September.
Oh yeah, they do. Like arborvitae tend to keep growing pretty well all season. But firs and spruces and pines have a spurt of growth and slow down. Now, if you'd been here a little earlier, you could have had a feast on mulberries. This produced a massive crop of black mulberries. And they're like blackberries, but not quite as delicious. Oh, here you can actually see one.
It's okay.
You see how much it looks like a blackberry? Somebody wants to sample it?
No, but what does it look like?
A mulberry.
Oh, it's just a little longer, tighter. No? Have you had a mulberry?
I've had mulberries. This particular mulberry.
It tastes like blackberries?
No.
Very bland.
Very bland. I guess you could make a jam out of it.
Of course, you
Because you add
had
honey and lemon
six
juice.
cups of sugar. You could make a jam out of most anything.
That's true.
even quince.
Even quince, yeah. Quince
These
is
are
good.
European firs, European silver firs. Now we're going to walk down, we're going to see some American holly, and then we're going to look for the koi. Now, American holly is both male and female, and this produces red berries. Those are red berries from last year, but you can also see the green berries that are going to be the red ones for this year. The male is down here, and I've got one with gold berries over there.
This happens to the really bad trees.
These koi reproduce in this pond, and some of them are approaching 2 feet long.
Okay.
Where'd you fly?
Let's see, there's one over there.
What?
See it?
What are we looking for?
See the big red with the
Oh.
black spots?
Yeah. Cool. This is a really pretty pond.
Now, there are white water lilies and there are yellow ones. The yellow ones are native and they tend not to be eaten by the muskrat. But the ornamental ones tend to be eaten by the muskrat. And then I have another pond with beautiful pink ones and some red ones. If you want to walk in the back of the house, it depends on you. What do you think? No. Okay. Well, now you know you have to come back.
Always leave something in that.
Right.
Is this your house, John?
Yeah,
And the pond's behind there?
yeah. The pond was, and I put the deer fences around, and they have to open the gate.
Oh.
But if I see somebody, I'll let them in. You know. And they can, they can do that.
Started from here.
And this was the first pond that I built.
How long has it been here? 40 years?
I moved here in the spring of '66, and I call that the first year. So this is the 48th.
It's mature.
And when I moved here, the grass was only in that circle. I'm not counting my neighbor. And one of my sons owns that property. Already half the size it once was.
Yeah.
And I planted wisteria on it, 3 or 4 different colors. White, pink, blue, purple.
So the struggle is on.
And a big limb dropped off on this side and fell in here. A little piece of wood got left, and this tree is developing from that.
This is like an epic battle of the wisteria and the willow.
Huh.
It's mostly wisteria. You're
That's
seeing
very
that they're the
poetic,
green.
right?
The
The
vines.
battle between the wisteria.
Hope I get through it. That rippling is all from bluegills or frogs. I don't see the big floor there. But look at here. Oh, is it one?
Who's the neighbor?
Anyway.
I
Now,
wash my leg coming.
when I built this pond, I foolishly thought maybe if I put some pea gravel in it, it wouldn't be muddy and we could swim in it. But the unbounded clay just sucks up everything, and it didn't make any difference. But I had a Mack truck deliver the pea gravel here. It drove right, these trees are only a foot high. It just drove right over here and dumped it. All these trees have grown up in that time.
Some people try rice straw
Okay,
to
yeah,
flocculate.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard that. But I think I've passed that stage where I'm worried about it.
Okay. That's even better.
Now this is my biggest, best Japanese larch. And we're going to go over here and walk out over that way. This is poison ivy right here, so if you want to walk around.
I know, I get
Now I know you're interested in the
Oh,
qualities of corkscrew-like willows. This willow is a European willow called snake.
Like European willow called snake. Also corkscrews.
And that's this willow right here. That's Salix alba. And if you get a little bit more this way, the light will be better. Well, I don't know. Maybe you want to
cool. That's the willow right there.
I've got to work on this and get it fixed up better sometime. Anyway, the deer managed to read through, and I've got to someday attack it properly. This is Chamaecyparis theoides, which is the eastern false cypress. I brought this up from a New Jersey swamp, but I've got many others that are of a bluer cast, and they're much more dramatic. That's also used, in flower arranging. Now it is safe to walk through here. You're not going to get poison ivy. This is a white spruce. Just follow this little path. This is Magnolia virginiana. This is a sweet gum. That's a black gum, Nyssa sylvatica. These are two bald cypress. This is the all-purpose swamp. Everything I plant in here can stand the wet feet. This is persimmon. And they come in male and female. This is, if we look properly, we'll see some of the small fruit, I hope. But, I don't know.
What is the purpose of them?
Here's some fruit right out here. Now they're not edible until late fall when they get soft, usually after frost.
What are they?
Persimmons.
Oh,
They're
cool.
very delicious, but if you eat them too soon, they're like the worst choke cherry you ever tasted.
Oh yeah, I've had one on ripe. Did you ever have persimmons on ripe?
Now,
Your mouth.
this is another corkbark tree. Feel the bark on that one. That's probably the best one in terms of the corkiness. Philodendron.
What kind of tree is it?
Philodendron.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And there's my best Alaskan weeping yellow cedar.
Oh, gosh.
And there's my best giant arborvitae from the west. Now they can both live nearly 1,000 years, and at least the arborvitae one can approach 300 feet.
That's beautiful.
And here's the cucumber tree. That grows to be the biggest magnolia. It grows as big as a white oak. Its blooms are almost not seeable. You have to really look hard for them because they're green on the outside and have a little yellow in the throat. They're called cucumbers because these green fruit grow to look like a little cucumber. So I invite any of you to come back, and if you're here between 5:30 and 6:30, you can carry ice cubes in a glass.
Is anything in it?
Of course.
Is happy hour here is 5:30.
Happy hour.
I'm here.
Now that is a western hemlock, right on your left. That's a western hemlock, and behind it's a western dogwood on the left. Right, no, right close. Yeah, that's a western dogwood. It bloomed well this year.
So John, why don't we videotape you inviting people to come and say a little bit about how they do that?
You can come anytime, as long as you know where to park. And you park on the lawn, get your car completely off the road at Maple Avenue. If it's all parked up or too crowded, you won't enjoy it. Anyway, and the brochures are on the doorway. If the visitor center isn't open, and we don't have enough volunteers to keep it open all the time, then just go up and pick up brochures so you'll have a map and sign in, because we are partly recognized by the amount of public that visits us. So by signing in, you help us keep track of how many people are coming. And then you can follow the trail down. And if you want a tour, you have to contact me and we arrange a time. If the tour takes 2 hours, you can see about what you've seen now. You can't see it all in 2 hours, but you can see most of it. You never can get into the backwoods, which is very interesting too.
What's the address here?
Well, 16 Maple Avenue is the entranceway, up where we're going to have the poetry reading.
16 Maple Avenue in what city?
Albany. Oh well, it's in the town of Bethlehem, in Slingerlands, the village of Slingerlands.
People will Google it and find it then.
Yeah, and we do have a website, and I think that the website thing is on the new brochures. I don't know if these brochures are there. And a blog too. We have a blog too.
And you're open every day?
You're open every day. You can come any day. Now, if we had enough volunteers or could actually employ people to keep the visitor center open, then probably we would have to have one day that's closed, and we probably would have hours, and we'd probably charge admission except for people that were members or anybody in school, including college, or preschool, or not school, too young. So we don't want to quibble over whether he's 5 or 6 or 13 or 14 or 12. We had a grant that allowed us to establish a teaching program with the local schools, and that's been very successful. School budgets, however, are a problem, and they even have trouble paying for transportation, which in some cases we've subsidized. This grant to promote an educational program to schools is a Bender Foundation grant, and so they're the ones that need to be given credit for the fact that we've been able to create that very successful program.